Scams. We hear about them in the news. Some of us have gotten them in our inboxes and on our answering machines. But what are they? Who are they targeting? And how do you protect yourself? I'll be joined by attorney Gavin Holihan to discuss those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm your host, Sam Chen. Scams. We read about them in the news. We hear about them. You probably have an email in your inbox from a Nigerian prince promising you gold if you send your social security number, bank routing number, and so forth to him. We get them on our voicemails. We get them in text messages and so forth. But why are scams so commonplace? What are the big ones? And what do you do to protect yourself? I'm pleased tonight to welcome back to the show attorney Gavin Holihan to break down these questions. Gavin, welcome back, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Absolutely. It's, again, just for our viewers to know, you are a criminal defense attorney by practice. You used to be an assistant district attorney, so you have been in the courtroom your whole life. You've been on both sides of it. You know these issues quite well. Is there anything you haven't seen yet?
Not that I can imagine. I've seen just about all of it from either side of the courtroom, certainly.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the perspective that you bring with that. Let's talk about scams. Let's just start at a very high 30,000-foot overview level. What are they? How is this a recent phenomenon? And we hear more about it now, but is this a recent phenomenon? How long have these things been going on? What's kind of, when you sit down with someone and talk to them about for the first time about them, what's the overview on it?
The overview on the scams is that different scams of different varieties have been going on forever. Mm-hmm. So the scams are nothing new. What is new, though, is the technology, especially the social media, the ability to reach out to multiple people in one try, whereas in the old days a scam would require sometimes interpersonal communication. You have to meet with someone. Mm-hmm. Now I have people who can send out 100 emails targeting 100 different people, and if only one or two respond to it, then they've made their money on that.
Wow.
So the society now, with social media, with the computers, but also with the breakdown of interpersonal communication, has made it easier for these broader scams, quick hit scams that will hit. If I send 100 people an email seeking $4,000 or $5,000, I don't need a whole lot of people to fall for it to make a whole lot of money on it.
Yeah. Is it safe to say it's become easier then to operate a scam, given the new technology? And also, we made the point earlier that the interpersonal relationships in our society, it seems to be an art of the past almost. Has that made it easier for scams to operate? It
has. In my opinion, it has. When you're sitting across the table from someone talking to them, you have the ability to judge them and to weigh them, to figure out their credibility or how honest they are, or whether you even like them or trust them. The scams that we see now most commonly are emails sent out saying, here's a problem, you have to fix it now, and someone else is in trouble, and here's how you fix it. And those are sent to people. We target certain people with these, and these are people who are not used to the criminal element. Mm-hmm. They've never stepped across the line in any way, shape, or form. And they respect authority, and they respond to appeals from authority. So they'll get a phone call or an email saying, I'm with the sheriff's department and you failed to appear for jury duty. There's a $1,000 fine for that. You must pay it now or you're going to go to jail now. Mm-hmm. So people respond to those because of their respect for authority and their fear of going to jail, and also their somewhat embarrassment that they may have done something wrong or broken the law.
Sure. What is so that leads to this question of who gets targeted with scams. We traditionally hear about senior citizens getting targeted, and I venture that may be perhaps a lack of understanding of new technologies and social media and things like that. But these affect more than just seniors, correct?
Absolutely. They are targeted to a broad array of people in society. Mm-hmm. I think we hear more about seniors because they're generally more trusting
Okay.
than our younger generation. The seniors haven't grown up with the same cynicism or distaste for authority that our younger generation has. The younger generation, younger people are more likely to look at these things critically, whereas the older people are more respectful of authority. They're more concerned about their position. They're more worried about getting in trouble. Oftentimes scams will target like a child or a grandchild of a senior, and their care for the child or the grandchild will compel them to comply with the scam.
Sure. So what does that scam look like then? You've mentioned that it can come by email, it can come by social media, it can come by a phone call, and what you gave an example of someone pretending to be from the sheriff's department calling and saying that there's a legal issue or they missed jury duty and they need to pay this fine now. You also just brought up a grandparent that is concerned about their child. So I've heard of scams where there's a call that says so-and-so has been kidnapped and there needs to be a ransom while that person's actually fine. What are the different scams that you've seen? What's popular? What scams work?
Well, the consistency with what scams work are scams that do a couple of different key components. No matter what the window dressing on the scam is, some things are consistent in that they're designed to create fear in the person. So there's some threat of something bad to happen to you if you don't comply.
Okay.
They typically have a level of authority that they refer to. The other thing that they do is they compress the time frame for you to react. So they don't give the target time to think. They don't give the target time to rationally consider what's happening, and also rarely give them time to consult with somebody else. So we see scams that are directed at things like you didn't file your taxes last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Something that you don't have direct access to. You may remember what you did on your taxes last year, but you might not remember 4 years ago what you did on your taxes. And we're the IRS, and you're going to be arrested for this unless you make this payment within 6 hours, 2 hours. And you make that payment by either some unusual method of payment. Typically, if you pay the IRS, you can do a wire transfer or you can write a check to the IRS. These scams will ask for cash. Or they'll ask for payment in gift cards. Gift cards are a big area. That should be a number one tip-off. Nobody legitimately takes payment in gift cards, right? Anybody asking for payment by gift cards, you should be done with that conversation right now. That's a scam. But they use gift cards because they're valuable and they're untraceable. So if I convince you to buy a gift card and you give me the number off of that gift card, I will cash it out immediately, and there's nothing you can do about that. That money is gone. So the money you spent to buy that gift card is effectively transferred to me in a way that you can't trace.
Right. Unlike a bank account where the bank can freeze it, can fight to reverse it, can investigate it. The gift card money is just gone.
Correct.
Where did these, and where and why? So is there a particular, we talked about demographics, you said they target anyone. But is there a specific, is this something that's specific to the United States? Is it something that's worldwide? Is it something that is specifically targeted at certain parts of or certain demographics? And also why? Why are scams such a big deal?
The why is the easy answer, because they make money.
Fair enough.
And because they work.
And
there's very little effort involved. It takes some thought, it takes some skill to draft an effective scam, but then you cast a wide net, and that's part of why it's different today than it was 50 years ago, is because it's much easier to cast that wide net. 100 years ago, you couldn't meet 1,000 people a day to try to scam them. Today, you can. Through email, through texting, you can reach 1,000 people a day or more if you try. And therefore, the scams don't need to be as convincing, because you only need a few people who fall for it to become profitable, and then you do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. Whether they target certain individuals, the answer, like demographics, is probably no. The scammers don't know enough about you individually to target you individually, so they cast a wide net, and then when you respond to it is when they then make their move.
We were giving some examples earlier. You had talked about the sheriff, the example of the IRS. Are there other examples that come to mind immediately that is something that you've seen recently or something that's out there currently or that's popular at the moment?
Sure, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we see someone has been arrested in another jurisdiction.
Okay.
Scam. That's a good
Okay.
one. So if you're a parent or you're a grandparent, you'll get a call either from law enforcement or a jail or a bail bondsman saying your grandchild has been arrested in some other jurisdiction and they're going to go to jail unless you can post the bond today, and the only way you can post it is by gift cards.
So that call is not actually coming from the jail then? That's just
No.
someone pretending to call from the sheriff's office or the jail? Or
Exactly.
Okay.
And often these are, the scammers don't know even if you have grandchildren or if you have children at all. So the people who don't fall for the scams, they don't report that to anybody. So
Sure.
you don't hear of the scams that fail, you only
Right.
hear of the scams that succeed. But the child or the grandchild being arrested who needs bail right away is a popular one. Because the grandparents or the parents are under time pressure, so they lose the ability to check with someone else or to verify. They can frequently be embarrassed by the fact that their child or grandchild got arrested, so they don't want to advertise that to
Sure.
another family member or friend or someone who they would trust to give good advice. And then they'll do whatever they can, whatever it takes to protect that child or the grandchild, and that includes sending money, substantial amounts of money, in a way that they will never get back again.
how many people do you think are affected by these scams? I mean, to your point, a lot of us get them. I've gotten the phone calls. I distinctly remember when I was working in the government getting a phone call about our HP computers, and we didn't have any HP computers, or I get a call about my AT&T bill and I don't have an AT&T line. But how many obviously enough people are falling for it that this continues. Is there a ballpark of how many people you think are affected by this on a regular basis?
It's very, very hard to know. They have statistics on how many millions or billions of dollars result in scams year to year, but that only reflects the people who report them.
Sure.
Most people who are scammed, once they figure out that they've been scammed, are embarrassed by it, and they don't report it. The likelihood of reporting some of these scams is therefore small, and even the ones that are reported, the likelihood of convictions is small because you can't tie back to the person who ran the scam. There's no identifiers, it's an email that doesn't exist, it's a cell phone number that no longer links to a person, and as we said with the gift cards or where you mail, there are people who will mail thousands and thousands of dollars of cash. They will take 10,000, 20,000. I think a recent story was, $70,000 in cash. A gentleman pulled out of his bank and was ready to ship to a scammer when someone at the shipping business, whether the post office or FedEx, said, "What's in the box?" And the answer was $70,000. And the shipper said, "Well, that's a scam. We're not doing that." So, how many happen? How many people are scammed? Probably impossible to gauge because it's embarrassing and difficult to count.
Wow. Well, when we come back, I want to break down with you a little bit of what people can do to protect themselves. And so don't go away. We'll be back with this fascinating conversation right after these messages. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Gavin, we're talking about scams. When we left off, you were talking about how it's difficult to fathom and even estimate how many people fall for this. The numbers are only those who report it, and you said a lot of people don't report it. I want to talk a little bit about how we can protect ourselves, especially our viewers. We do have a lot of seniors who watch this show. What they can do to protect themselves. To your point, a lot of people are embarrassed to talk about this, and so we'll do that job for them. First off, you talked about how the scams have changed over time with technology. Are they getting more creative? Is this something where, so some people, I know a lot of people say, well, in my day, we did X, Y, Z, and I know who I'm talking about, I know what's coming. How have these evolved, and are they at a point where we may not really understand how creative these scammers are getting?
The scammers really fall into a couple of different categories, but in general, the scams you're most likely to see are not very sophisticated at all.
Okay.
They are very, it's a blunt instrument that's designed to reach a high volume of people with the hopes that some of them will respond. Many of the emails that you see, one thing you can look for is an email address that is not common. So for instance, we see work-related scams where you will get an email from someone purporting to be your boss.
Okay.
And instead of your company email address, it's a different email address altogether. So that's a tip that it's not who you think it is. Emails that claim to be from a government agency that don't end in .gov,
Okay.
another tip off.
Fair enough.
Okay. The other thing that we see is things that require immediate attention. We all know the government doesn't move at that speed in any way, shape, or form, right?
Fair.
Yeah.
Very fair.
If the government needs something, it can wait. So, but those are designed to deprive the subject of the ability to talk to people. And it's
Okay.
also the embarrassment or the fear. So how do you avoid that as someone who gets an odd email or a strange request on the computer or Facebook or text message? First, take a break, take a minute to take a breath and pay attention to it, read through it. Does it make sense? Some of the scams we see, they'll mention facts that don't apply to you at all. Like your grandson is arrested in Texas. Well, I have 2 granddaughters, but no grandsons, and none of them are in Texas. So we can easily discard that one. But there may be other discrepancies that are a little more subtle, like they refer to an age of someone or the name of someone that you know, but no real identifiers that would convince you it's the same person that they're talking about. So the speed with which they demand action, it's almost always money that they can't trace, that it's not going to be sent to a check payable to Lehigh County, or the jury clerk or the IRS. It's going to be sent to some other person, and it's almost always in some mechanism of payment that can't be traced. Again, the gift cards are a clear tip-off.
Sure.
Anytime anyone contacts you for gift cards for any reason, the answer is no. But the other thing you can do is you can call the police. Right? The police are thoroughly familiar with almost all of these scams. Some I'm sure I haven't even heard of. And if you call the police and say, this is the call I got, my son is arrested in New Jersey and the bail bondsman needs me to send him $5,000, almost any police officer will be able to tell you that's a scam, don't do that.
Sure.
All right. And if you can get details of where it is supposed to be taking place, especially things like the IRS, there are ways to check on whether you owe the IRS money.
Right.
There are ways to check on whether the sheriff's department has a warrant for your arrest. It's a phone call to the sheriff's office, and they will tell you, yes, we have a warrant for your arrest, or no, we don't. But even things like that, an arrest warrant, a filing of criminal charges, those are almost never resolved by you paying money to the government. If they're going to arrest you for a crime, they're going to arrest you. They're not going to take $5,000 or $10,000 and pretend that it never happened. So, what we look for is the appeals to authority, the appeals to your credibility in the position of authority, your embarrassment or your fear of announcing that you were victimized is something that keeps the scams going. And also an unorthodox form of payment is a clear tip-off.
The other kind of scams that I saw a lot when I was in the government were ones that maybe were a little bit of a longer-term con. And so you would hear someone that they had been in a relationship with a soldier that was overseas who couldn't disclose their location, and then they had to wire so much money to bring them home from injury. How do you advise people on something like that where there's built a relationship? There's a relationship there. It's a fake one, but there's one there, and they have incredibly strong emotional ties now.
Those are longer-term scams that are harder to beat because the hook doesn't come until the end, where you've already invested time and energy in that relationship. And that's something that targets younger people who are more familiar with social media, whereas we don't see that too much in our older clients because they're not forging relationships with people they've never met. Whereas younger people are. It's not unusual for someone in their 20s or 30s to have a relationship online with someone that they've never met in person. And that makes them a little more vulnerable to those types of scams. But they still have the same main hook. There's a request for money that's transferred in a way that is essentially untraceable, or that you cannot get back. You can't cancel the check once it's been put in the mail. But also where it's going to can't be traced. So there's not a bank account or the name, it's a gift card or it's cash or it's some other form of payment that once it's out of your hands, is lost and gone forever. So that's a key component to any of these scams. The more sympathetic they sound, the more likely it is to be a scam.
How would you suggest someone reply to it? So generally, I get these in my inbox, the Nigerian prince or whoever it might be. I just hit delete. There is a British comedian named James Veitch who has either a TED Talk or some routine where he actually replies. He tells a story. He gets an email from the second wife of Nelson Mandela, who says that Nelson Mandela is in terrible health, and he replies by saying, "I'm so sorry to hear that Nelson's in terrible health, considering he died 4 years ago." Now, do you normally recommend that? He's a comedian; he's doing this for comic value. But do you normally recommend people reply or ask for more information? Do you recommend they call the police right away? What should someone do if they have something they're not sure about?
Well, it really depends on how much time and energy they care to devote to it.
Sure.
There's a theory among a lot of these scams that they are intentionally dumb, or they're intentionally bad. So for instance, a Nigerian prince who's got $5 million in an offshore account and needs 1,000 or 5,000 or 50,000 from you to free it up. You would think most people would look at that and say, well, that's ridiculous.
Right.
That's not how that works. But those scams are designed to be that way, so that the intelligent person reads it and doesn't pay any more attention to it. So it only drags into it the people who are gullible, the straights and the squares who think this might be true. And then it leads them down that path. So the intelligence of the scam is sometimes a little disconcerting, because you may look at it and say that's clearly ridiculous, and the comedian looks at it and wants to play with it, but really it's that way by design. So now if I've sent that email out to 1,000 people, all of the smart people who are never going to send me money are eliminated because they recognize it as a scam, whereas only the people who don't recognize it will play along. So whether you want to play along or not, that's a question of your time and your energy. If you call the police, only if you're thinking of sending money, but generally if you delete it, be done with it, that's probably, for most people, the best bet.
Let me ask this last question. Let's say someone gets scammed. What steps should they take?
If they get scammed, depending on the nature of the scam, you can certainly report it to your local police where it occurred. But how you got scammed is important as well. So whether you're defrauded on a credit card, you can contact your credit card company to try to stop the charges or reverse the charges. All of the credit card companies will do a fraud investigation, and if possible, they'll reverse the charges, and then you will not be charged for that. But the other thing to do is to talk about the people. We talk about those interpersonal relationships. Sure. You can explain to someone that you got scammed. This is how it went down. This is what you fell for. And then by that, you'll be educating the people around you, the people that you care about, and protecting them from something similar happening. It's a small solace, I'm sure, but one of the things that prevents people from talking about it is the embarrassment when talking about it is the very thing that can thwart it in the future.
In the future, that's great. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Gavin, thank you again for all your time.
Thank you for having me here.
Our pleasure, we'd love to have you back. You passed the audition. So. But let me ask you this as we close out. This is such an important topic, and you said earlier, a lot of times scams will target senior citizens for various reasons, but some scams target younger people, and people of all ages fall for that. What would you say to someone if they come into your office, like not for criminal defense reasons, but with a scam question, or if they called your office? What would you say to someone about scams and what the best way to protect themselves is, and about the embarrassment factor? They don't want others to know about it. How would you address it with them?
Yeah, the embarrassment factor is part of the scam itself, because it prevents you from alerting other people to it.
Sure.
You keep that secret because you're ashamed of it and embarrassed by it. And that means that everyone that you would have otherwise told about it is now uninformed and therefore vulnerable to the same scam. So I say don't be afraid to talk about it, especially with the people around you.
Yeah.
If the scam is particularly targeted to you or your family, it's even more important to tell your family, because they may be next victims. If you're in a certain community with a group of people that you're friends with and you've been targeted, they may also be targeted, and you may be able to alert them ahead of time that, no, I got that same thing and I got scammed. But the ways that you help yourself up front are you look for clues in the contact. The biggest clue is an unorthodox form of payment that's being requested. The next clue is the demand that you do something very quickly, within hours sometimes, or else something bad will happen. If it's an email from someone who supposedly knows you, like a coworker or a boss, check the email address. Find out whether that's real or not. Oftentimes those are the easiest clues that what you're dealing with is dishonesty.
Yeah, that's just such an important topic, and I think to your point, so many people do get affected by it, and it's probably more than we realize.
Without question. Without question.
So, Gavin, thank you so much for joining us and for breaking that down for us. I think this is of incredible use for our viewers. Hopefully, this helps a few people survive the next set of scams that comes their way.
I hope so. I hope so.
It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you again. That is all the time that we have tonight. My thanks to Gavin Holihan for breaking down this incredibly important topic, something that a lot of us face, a lot of us ignore, but a lot of us also fall victim to. That is all the time that we have tonight. So continue this conversation with us online. Just use the hashtag #FaceTheIssues, and we hope to see you again next week. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.